Hello, everyone. I am John Higgins, contributing writer to Film and TV Now, and I am delighted to welcome one and all to this interview special with Chris Chan Lee, the writer-director of the new indie film Silent River, which plays as part of the online Paris International Film Festival 2022, which runs from the 10th to the 20th of February. Now, normally at this point, I will give a brief sentence introducing what this film is about. But on this occasion, I can't, because as you'll discover for yourself, and as we're going to discover in a moment with Chris, it is an incredibly complex and difficult film to describe in any shape and form. Chris, a warm welcome to you. First of all, thank you so much for a really terrific and unusual, thought-provoking film, which again, as I think people will discover for themselves, it's a spoiler-free movie. It's a spoiler-proof movie because, again, you're drawn into a really strange and real interesting world, which is a high mix of genres. Now, my first question is, obviously, it's a difficult one to call. And after watching Reflection, I'm still posing some questions. But my question to you is, how the hell do you pitch a project like this to people so that you can make what you want, what your vision is?
Yeah, first of all, John, thank you so much for having us and covering our film Silent River. We really appreciate it. We are a true indie, independent, scrappy, do it yourself kind of feature movie, And we're so honored to be having our international premiere at the Paris International Film Festival. So thank you to both organizations so much. So John, I mean, it's an interesting question because what you're touching on is really what triggered the whole endeavor was, I've been working as a filmmaker in the United States and in particular as an Asian American content creator for many years. I don't even want to say how long it's been at this point, but I've been doing this for a long time. And I have a lot of various projects that I have in script form, either that I've written or collaborated with other writers that are in development, but they require considerable resources to get off the ground. So a few years ago, we've been, like every project, we've been getting so close to being fully funded, and then things would bottom out, and then it would happen again and again and again. And I was getting really exasperated. And I was like, I've been working as a filmmaker for so long in every stage of production, from development to filming, post-production. I know everything top to bottom, Well, okay, I know 90% of the craft top to bottom. And there's certainly people who are better than me in certain areas, right? But my point was, like, why am I waiting for permission to make a movie? I know how to make a movie. Technology, the advancements in technology has brought the barriers to entry quite low. Unlike 20 years ago, where film and processing was like incredibly cost prohibitive, etc. But now there's so many like digital advancements. I know how to do that stuff, and I also know a team of collaborators that are experts at their craft and their artistic skills, vocabulary. I'm starting to get long-winded, but I wanted to boil this down. So a few years ago, a friend of mine, Wes Liang, who is also the lead actor in the film, along with Amy Sang and Max Faugno, well, he and I were basically just having conversations. Like, we both have projects we want to turn into films, but we're both kind of getting tired about waiting around. We had this opportunity to film a movie with complete permission at a hotel. So I basically, from a writing standpoint, I reverse engineered it. I'm like, okay, I know Wes is going to star in this movie. We have Amy, we have Max, we have Dakota, Chandra, Cindy, all of our capable cast. How do we backtrack from these resources, and what can I write that's going to be in this specific sandbox? Let's take away all the headaches of having to travel to multiple cities and locations. Let's just do it right here in one place. And because this is touching back on your original question, John, but because this was like a completely independent film, we could do anything we want. There was no permission to be had. And, you know, I got into the film business because David Lynch, David Lynch's Blue Velvet was like an awakening for me when I first saw it. And I that made me truly understand the power of cinema and a singular artistic vision. And I've learned so much about film history and everything since then. But that was the trigger. So let's make a movie that, despite the fact it's low budget, it's indie, right? Um, it doesn't have Colin Farrell, who's a great actor, but I'm just saying, like, it's just, very limited resources. Let's make a film that only we could make. No one in the world could replicate what we have done. It's a very personal style of filmmaking.
Hmm. So, I mean, my next question is actually about, I mean, funny enough, you touched on Blue Velvet, and I mean, you've actually asked, Nate, you've actually prompted, you've actually answered what my next question, which is what prompted you to explore similar context. But going for expanding on that, what fascinates you about David Lynch overall? Because again, he's more of a film sketcher than a filmmaker. I mean, I watched a masterclass, and he's got an interesting story to tell because he sketches rather than creates. And I think one of the most interesting quotes I ever said was, he said, when he was making Blue Velvet, he said the interesting thing is, he said it was always about, somebody would give him 20. It's about the character of Tom McLachlan's character. There's 25% of everything established, and then it's up to him to find out what the other 75% of the story is. I think it was something like that. So what fascinates you overall about what he explores in his films?
Yeah, I have a lot of influences these days, but I gotta tell you, like, it's a great question, John. What fascinates me about David Lynch, I mean, I watched a lot of his interviews. I think I saw that masterclass as well, and and I've always been tracking him since the early days. Um, and a lot of times he refuses to really give answers when he's asked point blank to reflect on his movies. And my takeaway from that, it's not that he's random or sloppy or or not rigorous in his approach. I think he is incredibly rigorous as an artist, but he trusts his imagination, his instincts, and his subconscious. He lets that be a part of his work. And yeah, some of his films are like real head scratchers. As a David Lynch fan, some of his films I just don't get what the heck is happening, you know. But Blue Velvet is like a real. It seems to have a real balance of narrative storytelling and Hitchcockian values, but also coming from, like, no one else could have made that film except David Lynch, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is incredibly inspiring.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I had one reaction, and I think this film is going to provoke many. I mean, what you'll probably discover in the course of over the course of the festival is that it will become a major topic of discussion, because this will be the movie that is the left field option. There are other films I've seen in the festival which are straightforward, but this, now, I've described it as a sci-fi road movie mystery, because you have Ex Machina in there. You have a robot that we're trying to sort of understand where that's coming from. We've got the road movie with Elliot and Greta exploring, and they converge on this hotel, and there's a bit of balance in that. And then you have the mystery of the road, and then there's a visual effect in it that actually sort of taps into, is this real or whatever it is. So when you were, and they all play out over the course of this running time, but when you were conceiving the original idea, I mean, what did you specifically concentrate on first?
Because we knew that we had access to this hotel, one of the unique advantages we had was, while I was in the writing process, about 9 months before we started shooting, I was able to do a tech scout of the actual hotel to look at all the various rooms and their unique features, because not all the rooms were the same, right? And there were the rooms that we used had very unique physical attributes compared to the rest of the hotel. So I was able to specifically design the scenes and the choreography and the physical relationships based on this technical scout that we did 9 months earlier, that was a huge advantage, you know. Um, I'm losing my train of thought. What was the next part of it? There was something
Well,
else I wanted to
it
say.
was kind of like the idea of, you know, when you're looking at, when you're trying to create a unique experience, because obviously you are going left field. Was it the road aspect of it? Was the science fiction aspect of it? Was it the mystery of the film? Because again, when you get to the second half of the film, it starts to, that's when the narrative elements of the film play out, because you're trying to do that. So I was just curious to know, what was your start off point?
Exactly. Well, John, it was basically grounded in the script, which, of course, once we started shooting, we started to deviate here and there. But the intent was to create expectations about what's going to happen in the film. So, without giving away spoilers, at the beginning, um, you know, the film starts out where a young man checks into a remote desert hotel on his way to reconcile with his ex, and then he encounters this mysterious woman and kind of develops an awkward friendship with her and gets embroiled in her cause, right? So as a film, you're watching the movie in the beginning and you think it's just about this guy who's depressed and is just going, it's like a character drama of him just, you know, moping around in the hotel. And the film actually, that was kind of the strategy, was to kind of attempt to disarm the audience at the beginning and make them believe, okay, it's going to be this kind of movie, you know. It's going to be like a Five Easy Pieces or something, I don't know. But then there is absolutely a twist that arrives rather late, but it just turns everything upside down. And I think, like, the film attempts, like, at least from our intention, it attempts to be a celebration of the realm of possibilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just in telling stories in a movie, but also in life. Like, we think we start to build expectations, but we have to leave ourselves open to surprise, you know? And that was the kind of unique experience I wanted in the film. Was there's kind of too many conventions and too many rules in Western cinema storytelling. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are like some really fabulous filmmakers and movies and shows and everything going on right now, but there's also like a lot of convention. And I really wanted to make a film that was like, you know, cinema doesn't have to be put in a box with this limited vocabulary. Cinema can be jazz, it could be impressionistic, it could be so many things. And actually, another touchstone, John, was right before we started filming, I saw Zulawski's Possession, which was like in the early 80s, right, with Isabelle Adjani.
Yeah, it's actually just come out. I mean, that is another weird movie, which, again, if in case you haven't seen it, guys, it stars Sam Neill. And it was quite a big title, real big cult film. I think it's on DVD. I think it's on the streaming platforms, but I think it's a similar kind of thing.
Yeah, John, like I totally missed it. Like, you were way ahead of me. I only finally saw it a few years ago, right before we started shooting. And that movie to me just blew me away, because it was like, wow, there really are no rules in cinema. Like, why are we kind of self-imposing these rules? Those actors did such stylized performances, right? But they all coexisted in the same world. And I got it, you know, I feel like Ajani pulled it off better than maybe some of the other actors, but they were all in the same movie. So that was totally a liberating experience for me to watch.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, what sets this apart is the two Asian American leads. I mean, that was what I think elevates it. And obviously, we've got to talk about the cast. But my question is, tell us a bit more about your two leads, and also in terms of what sort of stories are you aiming to tell that deal with more diverse perspectives? Are you planning to do, you know, take this kind of point of reference and do similar kind of things and do different variations of different stories?
Yeah, John, that's a great question. You know, my first film, Yellow, which was released back in 1997 and had actually quite a good festival run, and a very successful commercial theatrical run. Um, that film was an ensemble comedy drama about eight Asian American high school students, and it was a product of me having grown up in the 80s and having loved 80s pop culture, MTV. I was like a huge consumer of all that stuff, and of course John Hughes films and all those kind of iconic 80s youth movies. But there was a real lack of Asian representation in those films, and so I really wanted to make a movie that put Asian American kids front and center, and
Mhm.
but it was also like a very genre movie. So that's what's kind of different about Silent River, right? It's more of a hopefully an auteur film that's been authored by this collaborative of artists. Um, and in Silent River, our lead actors, I mean, we have kind of an ensemble, but our lead actors, Wes Liang and Amy Sang, Max Fagno, they Wes and Amy are both committed filmmakers on their own right. Wes has directed and produced um, other features, and they're both screenwriters and they're both working actors. So we share that same passion for this trajectory, and also, as far as like the Asian American filmmaking landscape, we're like a really weird movie actually, because we don't. This Silent River is not tackling identity issues. It's not tackling the immigrant story, and those are all like incredible terrains to be spaces to be working in, spaces that I've tried to chip away at as well in my past. But this is a weird one. This is like if someone goes to an Asian American festival, who we've been very fortunate that they've been supporting our projects, by the way, but they might not expect to see what they're about to see. It really stands out. It's very much kind of caters to an art house crowd, people who are cinema lovers, and I think that's what goes even. It's inclusive of the Asian
Yeah,
American audience, but also
yeah,
goes beyond it.
yeah. I mean, the interesting thing is this is exactly what I've been calling out with LGBTQ diversity, because with diversity in gender is a big thing, and I always wondered what it would be like to have, a kind of, although we'll think of, John Woo, or we'll see, Bruce Lee and stuff. The interesting thing is when I see John Woo movies like Broken Arrow or Mission Impossible or Face Off, for example, they are they're kind of like a real cannonball into the heart of all American narrative is. But for a fact that when you watch Face Off, you're also referencing back to Hard Boiled, which is this sheer tour de force of energy and action. It blew me away. I mean, the fact that everybody's the coordination. So I think, interesting enough, I think this is a very groundbreaking movie for that reason. So tell us a bit more about you. You mentioned earlier about the production. You mentioned some things about the production team. How big was your crew?
Yeah, John, the crew was not big enough. Everybody had too many hats to wear, But I was like incredibly lucky because every person made their mark. I don't even know what the count was, but if you can imagine, like we were probably smaller than a student-sized film crew. I mean, student productions have gotten actually quite extravagant in recent years compared to when I went to film school. We literally had probably like a dozen people in the hotel room while we were filming. It was really small. Um, uh, and my director of photography, Norbert Scher, he did a lot of the physical gaffing work. We had a gaffer as well, and um, we had a couple of people on the camera team, but it was very bare bones. That was part of the strategy, actually, in a way, because by having a small crew, you're very nimble. You can move quickly, but we probably went a little bit overboard in terms of it being a little bit too much on the shoulders of each person. I was like really lucky that everyone had such a great work ethic. We only shot in about 2 weeks, 2 weeks spread over about a 3.5 week period. We had to take a break in the middle because the hotel that we were shooting at was being taken over by Johnny Depp's band and his road crew. because they were going to have a show at the nearby desert casino. So they pushed us out. We had to leave, take a break for a week, and then come back. But it was only like roughly a 2-week shoot.
Mm-hmm. And so you've answered part of my question, but specifically, where is the Desert Hotel? Whereabouts is it? Where is the location?
The hotel is just south of Palm Springs, and I don't know why I'm blanking out on the name, but if you look at a map, whatever town is just south of Palm Springs, that's where it was.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
So
California.
okay. So tell us about the visual effects, because there's one key visual effects which I'm well impressed with, because again you catch into that in a way. So what was the visual effects strategy on this movie?
Our visual effects was led by our VFX supervisor, Jared Potter, um, who works out of Washington State in the USA. Um, our conceptual thoughts were about trying to keep it as grounded and organic as possible, and to not have it be overly flashy or techy or anything like that. But um, we had kind of a breakthrough where we realized one of the visual motifs was to deploy the idea of like tree branches and roots, that kind of thing, as kind of specific and maybe ridiculous that might sound, but that actually helped us make it organic. And that's what Jared deployed in his work, was that kind of visual influence.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, we're coming to the end of our interview anyway, so just a few final questions. I mean, what issues and themes are you keen to explore in future works?
I'm always interested in doing new projects. So each film is going to be very different in a sense as far as its interests and its canopy. I have a horror film that I really want to do. I think horror films really demand a lot out of the filmmaker, because you have to really capture the imagination of an audience to make it work, you know? Um, and I'm a huge fan of like Hitchcock. I mean, I've seen he was so prolific in his career, and I've seen so many of his films, and that kind of language that he has taught us, I feel like I really want to be in that playground, you know? Um, I mean, I also have like a Cold War drama. I have character like indie dramas that I want to work on, but I feel like a horror film might be next for me, and it'll be potentially a little bit more, a little bit. It might cast a wider net in the audience it'll capture. I know, because I know Silent River is like very specific. It's for film lovers. It's for people who have a lot of wonderful film history experiences and kind of want to see things reconfigured in a new movie. Um, but but hey, I'm not against making a commercial film either, you know.
Okay, so I mean, the interesting thing is, I'm sort of referring this because often filmmakers, they kind of have a startup point with their career. So Paul Schrader, for example, he said that Taxi Driver, American Gigolo, and Light Sleeper were actually variations of the same character in different stages of their lives. Now, in terms of Silent River, because it is a unique movie, but however, you might just get one or two film fanatics who might see a lot more into it. Do you see this as a standalone work, or do you feel that this is going to be part of a series of films that you want to use to explore the characters, like with David Lynch did with Twin Peaks and something like that?
Yeah, great question. I mean, man, John, to have made Taxi Driver, if I could just, if a filmmaker just could just make Taxi Driver and be done, that would be enough for like an entire career, you know. Um, but regardless of what kind of films I'm going to make in the future, I'm always going. The one thing I believe, at least I hope, is that I'm always going to be making something that is challenging and progressive. I think even working as like a quote unquote Asian American filmmaker, I've never done anything that would be expected at the time, coming from my trajectory. So I always want to do something that is fresh and rewarding, and that I would want to see in the cinema. So that's the one thing that I hope to maintain.
Okay. And finally, my final question is, what are you most proud of about Silent River?
What I'm most proud about it is that our team really stuck to our guns. We had a lot of outs along the way to wait for something better, etc. But we stuck to our guns and we made the movie that we wanted to make. And we also know that it's a very idiosyncratic project. But we stuck to our guns in terms of making the film that we wanted to see, you know? Because trying to write for somebody else, trying to deliver a product to somebody else, like who knows exactly how that all works, right? But let's make a film that we, as all of our collaborators, West, Amy, Max, Chandra, Dakota, Cindy, and all of our producers and department heads, we wanted to be really proud about our effort. And that I feel like that is what we achieved. So.
Okay. Well, Chris, I think you've got every reason to be proud. Again, this movie is going to really, it's going to be a mind-bending experience. I mean, all I would say to everybody who is watching this interview, get ready for something interesting and unique and groundbreaking, as I say. Anyway, Silent River plays as part of the online Paris International Film Festival between the 10th and 20th of February. Tickets and info are at www.parisintlfest.com, where there's a virtual village which Festival Director Jenna Sura has put together. Support independent films and filmmakers like Chris. Chris is shining light in diversity, and he's created an incredible experience. If you want to read more about it, you can read my review of Silent River at www.filmandtvnow.com. Support cinemas and do go and watch a film with an audience, as there's nothing like it. Do check out some of David Lynch's films, which were in a profound influence. By all means, check out Possession. And thank you, one and all, for watching. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, John, and thank you, Paris International.
You're welcome. Thank you.